Good Friday afternoon to you. I hope you're having a great day. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Plenty of Browns to talk about a little later in the show. Randy Gurzi from Dog Pound Daily will join us. And we begin by talking Browns. NFL Draft Day 2 a week from today. It'll get underway next Thursday. Andrew Berry met with the media, talked about draft preparations for the Browns. Here's what he had to say about the priorities in the draft for the Browns.
It's almost like going to a restaurant hungry. Like, you get familiar with a number of these players, and whether you have 2 picks or 20 picks, you probably feel like you never have enough. Our approach is more about really just adding as many young talented guys to the roster that we can. We certainly do have call it certain positional leanings. I won't necessarily disclose those specifics in this setting, but we are a little bit more long-term focused as opposed to short-term focused when we make selections when we're on the clock.
And let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, that has been apparent in Andrew Berry's regime. It's no secret. Wide receiver, defensive tackle, defensive end. Those are the positional leanings that they need to add to.
Yeah, and I understand Andrew Berry obviously saying, they want to keep everything open, and it makes sense to do so because the needs the team has now might not be the needs they have in a few weeks. When you talk few years, I should say, because players are going to leave in free agency. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be decline of certain players. So you can't anticipate needs, but you can kind of understand what could be coming down the pipe, when it comes to what you might have to account for. So I think there's part of that goes into it, in addition to just addressing current needs. But I mean, we all see the needs. I'm sure Andrew Berry and company see the needs when it comes to, receiver help and defensive line help. 3 picks on day 2, certainly with some pretty good depth at those positions in day 2. They have a chance to address those needs. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in a week.
Yeah, and again, round 1 Thursday, 2 and 3 are on Friday, a week from today, and that's when the Browns will have 3 picks. All right, you wrote an article about 5 defensive tackles who could fit for the Browns on day 2 of that draft. So 2nd and 3rd rounds, let's go through a couple of those names. Logan Hall from Houston, Travis Jones from Connecticut. Those are 2 guys that are linked to the Browns by a couple of mock drafts. What do you see in those 2 prospects? What do you like about them as far as the Browns are concerned?
Well, they're definitely 2 very different defensive tackle prospects. Logan Hall from Houston, I mean, depending on where you go for, draft research and things like that, you'll see him either listed as a defensive tackle, as a defensive end. He can play both. He's a guy that he's certainly big enough to play on the inside at times at about 283 pounds, but he's also a guy who's got, the agility to play outside. So he's kind of a guy that can fill multiple roles on a defensive front. His length is going to be something that's tough for interior offensive linemen to really handle, especially as he continues to get stronger, continues to develop more pass rush moves. He's such an interesting player. I know some might consider him a tweener, but as we saw with the Browns and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, they have not been afraid to take players that maybe don't have a specific position nailed down, and then they can create a role for him. As for Travis Jones from UConn, more of your traditional defensive tackle. He's a guy that's basically, at this point, kind of right now a 2-down off defensive tackle at about 325 pounds. Pretty agile at a 7.33 second 3-cone time at the combine, which tells you there may be some room for him to grow as a pass rusher. But day 1, I don't know if he's a guy you could put out there in passing situations, which is okay. I mean, at this point, with a guy like Travis Jones, you're not drafting him to be a day 1, 3-down defensive tackle. You'd be drafting him to be kind of a run-stopping defensive tackle and hope you can develop some pass rush tools along the way so that he can become a more complete defensive tackle for you. All
right, the 3 other guys that you list in those 5 D tackles that could help the Browns, day 1, you list DeMarvin Leal from Texas A&M, John Ridgway from Arkansas, and then Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma. What stands out about those guys, and what do you like about each of them?
Well, I look at Leal and Winfrey very similarly to Hall in that they're not bigger defensive tackles. Those are guys that are going to win more with quickness, with that first step, the ability to disrupt. And you look at Leal, he was a former 5-star prospect that went to Texas A&M. He's got athletic tools. Had a very good season last year, 8.5 sacks, 12.5 tackles for loss. You know, he was a 5-star. He played fairly well, but not kind of at the elite level that you would expect out of a 5-star prospect. Still pretty solid. I think he'd be a very interesting fit on this Browns defensive front. And another guy, Perry Winfrey, you know, obviously he's been another popular guy as far as, you know, mock drafts go for the Browns. 290 pounds, maybe a little smaller than you would like for some defensive tackles, but what he does is he disrupts. He's got a very good first step. He can split gaps in the middle and just create a lot of havoc. He's very long, and if you look at his numbers, he had 23 tackles a year ago. 11 of them were for loss. So he makes a living out of getting into the backfield. And I look at John Ridgeway, if they want to go for a guy, maybe a pick 99, maybe even day 3, I think he's more of a lower ceiling player than Travis Jones. Similar size-wise, 6'5", 321, so he's a big guy. He's another run stuffer type of space eater on the defensive front. You know, he was an FCS transfer, came from Illinois State to Arkansas, played pretty well. I think, you know, he may have starter potential, but at this point, I think he's more of a limited player than Travis Jones. Doesn't mean he can't be productive, but his game is going to be about, you know, eating up blockers and controlling the run game.
All right, before we move on from this topic, Hall, Jones, Leal, Ridgeway, Winfrey. Say, for whatever reason, all 5 of them are available at 44. Who is your pick?
I'm going Logan Hall. I'm fascinated by the idea of the interior pass rush because, as we know from quarterbacks, the number one thing they don't want to see when you're talking about pressure is pressure coming from right up the middle. You know, if the pressure is coming off the ends, you know, you have tackles that can kind of handle it in some cases, and you can kind of step around it. If you got pressure coming up in your face from the interior, that creates a whole host of problems. And Logan Hall, I think, is a guy who can generate that interior pass rush. Like I said, he's long, and that kind of length is something that can bother guards and centers, and there's also situations where he can kick outside as well. So there's a lot of versatility in his game. There was power, there's length, there's a lot to like about Logan Hall.
So one of the big signings, or actually trades, it wasn't a signing, one of the big acquisitions the Browns made prior to all the draft preview stuff, Amari Cooper, Andrew Berry, his first chance to kind of discuss what the Browns like and what they got with Amari Cooper at the wide receiver position.
I think Amari is one of the best route runners in the NFL. And it's not just like a particular route that he can separate on, but just really the diversity of ways that he can get open. He's just got a really good feel for, separating, whether it's, laterally, at the top of routes or even vertically. And so I think that's something that really stands out about his game. And then, his fantastic hands as well. Catches the ball really well, and has been productive for a long time in the NFL.
You know, Tim, it's interesting he mentioned separation. That's one of the things you and I have talked about. We didn't see that with the wide receiving core from a season ago.
Yeah, and I think that's got to be a big factor, not just in the trade for Amari Cooper, but also how the Browns may proceed and perceive these receivers in this draft is looking for guys who can catch the football and separate, because those were the two biggest problems the team had a year ago. Drops and guys not be able to get open. And I even look back at Amari Cooper's combine numbers just to kind of get an idea of the kind of separator that he is. Really good 3-cone time. So there's a lot. It shows the separation, the agility there he had when he was a draft prospect. It's translated to the NFL where he's become one of the better route runners in the game. There's a lot of good things to like about him. He's been productive everywhere he's been, in both with the Raiders and with the Cowboys. He may not be as dynamic as you would like, but the guy just gets the job done, and I think that's kind of just what the Browns need, is a guy who's going to, despite the attention he's going to get from opposing defenses, he's still going to be able to get open, going to be able to make plays, and I think that's kind of what you want. That's obviously what you want on your number one receiver.
Yep, that you need when you need to find him. He's going to find a way to catch the ball. All right, before we head to break, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about another crazy 3-team trade.
Oh, Baker to Tennessee. 3-team trade. Tennessee sends Ryan Tannehill to Seattle. We send Baker to Tennessee. and then we get like a DK out of it. Obviously other pieces, but that's just the core.
Yeah, I again, if you can find a way to get DK Metcalf without a first-round pick, I'm all for it. I don't think you're getting DK Metcalf. But again, you're going to have to get creative with some of these things. I wouldn't be surprised to see Baker in some sort of creative trade. That one I don't think is going to happen, though.
No, there just seems like way too much kind of going there. I mean, I don't know if the Browns necessarily would feel comfortable trading Baker to another potential AFC contender in the Titans because, you know, for as much fault as Baker Mayfield's shown, I don't know if you want to face him in a situation where, you know, it's a playoff game or seeding's on the line against Tennessee. So that's kind of where I kind of look at that as maybe it wouldn't work from a Browns perspective. I don't know why the Seahawks would want Ryan Tannehill. I would assume they would want a quarterback that's a little younger, you know, and maybe still has room to grow, whereas I think Tannehill's ceiling is kind of tapped out. And I mean, I know obviously DK Metcalf would be, you know, an interesting fit. I mean, I just talked about the Browns still looking, maybe needing a dynamic receiver. DK Metcalf is about as dynamic as they get when you talk about the size and speed combination, but it just seems unlikely. The Seahawks are going to ask a lot for him, and they should, because he is a very, very good receiver. I would assume maybe it's a thing where, you know, they just kind of play it out and see if he can help out whoever the next potential answer is at quarterback.
Yeah, and the other thing is think Tyreek Hill in terms of what they're going to want for DK Metcalf, and that's a whole lot of draft capital. Browns don't have that from the Deshaun Watson trade. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will hear Andrew Berry's thoughts on Jarvis Landry. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik. So Jarvis Landry, report was down to between the Saints and the Browns. Andrew Berry talked about the type of year that Jarvis Landry had a season ago.
I thought Jarvis was productive for us last year, and he did battle through a few injuries and toughed it out and got back as quickly as possible. I think everybody knows our affinity for Jarvis the person and Jarvis the competitor. I think he'll have a successful season wherever he ends up next year.
Tim Bielik, certainly sounds like the general manager is more than willing to accept Jarvis back if the price is right.
Yeah, and I think that's, kind of how it's got to be with the Browns, going forward, when you got so many cap ties, with Deshaun Watson, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, just to name a few. I mean, you can't pay everybody. So it just kind of comes down to if Jarvis Landry is going to be okay making much less money to come back to Cleveland than he did, before the team let him go prior to the start of the offseason. I look at Jarvis Landry. Obviously, there's a lot of value to him if he wants to come back to Cleveland. We know the veteran leadership he provides. He knows the system very well. He's a reliable slot target for Deshaun Watson and the quarterbacks on this football team. But it's just going to come down to, money. And as we always say in the NFL, money talks. I know you can manipulate cap space, but I think part of it is also, the Browns maybe don't want to have like very little cap space left so they can have some roll over into 2023 and beyond when they're going to start to need that cap space.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about a question concerning the wide receiver room and the draft.
Hey, fellas. Is it possible the Browns do not pick a receiver with the first 3 picks we own if their guys are just not there, and instead look to some proven veterans to add to the room? I know there's still Jarvis Landry and Will Fuller out there, but there's a couple others I haven't heard much mention about, such as Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, both from the Bills, and does Mohamed Sanu from the 49ers have anything left in the tank? Thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate you guys. Bye-bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Sanu, he's probably towards the end of his career. I'd throw T.Y. Hilton into that mix too as well. That's somebody that's still out there. I think it's possible. Your thoughts? Do you think it's possible they don't take a wide receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round?
Certainly possible. I mean, it always depends kind of how the board falls. I mean, the more that, we get closer to draft week, we're only a few days away, of course, the more it kind of seems like, based on the chatter you hear on social media and the reporting that's out there, that maybe one of those top 8 or 9 receivers doesn't fall to the Browns at 44, which case they would, I would assume, an edge rusher would be much more in play, or a defensive tackle than 78. Maybe guys like John Mechie and Alec Pierce from Cincinnati aren't there. And even in 99, I think you could still get a pretty good receiver with a guy like Kyle Phillips from UCLA, who's more of a slot guy, but I'm a big fan of as a sleeper because of his agility. He was incredibly impressive in his 3-cone and his short shuttle. I actually put out on Twitter the other day, those numbers are comparable to what Amari Cooper did at his combine. I'm not saying they're going to be the same receivers, but, he's a guy that could be there 99, but I look at those options that the caller mentioned. I don't know if any of them, to me, would keep me from taking a receiver. I just think there's value in getting a younger player, a rookie who could come in that has dynamic tools, that, can learn the position behind a guy like Amari and, this offense. And there's a lot there. I think that, to me, the upside of taking a rookie in the 2nd or 3rd round, would mean more than signing one of these guys to a 1-year deal. I think you got to look out for continuing to develop the position more than just 1-year fixes.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Peoples-Jones, Schwartz. So there are a couple younger guys, but to your point, that's kind of the 3 levels that Andrew Berry's looking at this year. Down 5 years down the road and 3 years down the road. You mentioned cap space. Let's take a look at it. Browns are actually in really good spot. This is from Jack Duffin again. $27.722 million in cap space. You see the changes coming up. They haven't figured in Rochelle's deal, the Baker trading, which would, if they don't have to eat any of it, that would add $18 million more. And you still have Hooper coming off at $9.5 million. So when you look at it, that's another thing Andrew Berry has done, is the cap is in a really good spot.
Of course, no question. I mean, it's pretty shrewd by Andrew Berry, the way he's been able to manipulate some of these contracts to free up that space. And don't forget as well, with the deal that the NFL has got with Amazon, that there's a good chance that cap could skyrocket in the next few years and free up even more space down the road if the Browns want to continue to add to this core, in 2024, 2025 or whatever, going forward. But you also have to factor in as well, if they sign Jadeveon Clowney, that's going to eat into that cap space. Whatever they kind of have to eat off the Baker Mayfield contract to move him is going to get factored in. So there's a lot at play there. But it looks like, Andrew Berry and company are poised to at least preserve a fair amount of cap space and roll it over into 2023 is, like I said, is going to be pretty important considering, the massive cap hit that Deshaun Watson alone is going to take is about $54 million or so next year. So you got to have space in there to kind of absorb that and, make it so it's not exactly crippling what you have on the roster.
All right, so you did a mock draft, and we're going to take a look at a couple of spots that you have the Browns picking out. One of these includes a trade. All right, so at 44, you have the Browns taking Logan Hall. You talked about how much you like him. So briefly, what do you think Logan Hall brings? And then we'll go into who you have the Browns taking with a couple of other picks.
I think he brings a lot of good athletic elements to the table: versatility, length, quickness. He's got some power to his game. I think what he brings is a pass rush element to the interior. And again, a guy who could play outside if need be as a bigger defensive end in that situation. There's a lot to like about Logan Hall's game. And, he's not going to be your traditional defensive tackle, but if you're looking for a disruptive player who can fill a couple roles, I think Logan Hall could be your guy.
Now you have the Browns trading up, so 78 and 118 to move up to 61, and you haven't taken wide receiver Alec Pierce. Tell me what you like about that and how you weighed as far as that trade goes.
Well, I've kind of played around with all these trades in the PFF mock draft simulator to make sure they were making sense, and this was one that kind of made sense. And I just talked about, what receivers are going to be there at 78 potentially if the Browns don't take one at 44. I kind of try to put that scenario in mind. And when you look at Alec Pierce, he's a guy that I think could sneak into the end of the second round, maybe early third round. I don't know if he would be there. And what sticks out to me about Alec Pierce is he is a pretty dynamic receiver. He's 6'3", 211 pounds, was tremendous in the NFL Combine way back earlier in the draft process. He's obviously a big play threat, got some good speed, maybe not as agile as you'd like him to be. He's got some questions about separation. But I think with a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, who's pretty accurate and he knows how to throw guys open, you want to have dynamic players who can stretch the field. I think Pierce can do that from day one. He can also be a good red zone threat pretty early in his career. And you kind of hope that having a guy like Amari Cooper there for a guy like Pierce, whoever the Browns draft, that they'll kind of learn more from in terms of separation and nuance when it comes to running routes, because I think those are pretty underrated skills.
All right, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. A couple rounds later in the draft, you have the Browns taking a tight end, Jalen Wiedemeyer from Texas A&M. What did you like about him, and what intrigues you with Wiedemeyer?
Well, about 2 months ago, if you had told me that Jalen Wiedemeyer was going to make it all the way to day 3, I would have called you crazy, because I thought he was the number 1 tight end in this class, right up there with Colorado State's Trey McBride. Then the offseason testing happened. I mean, Jalen Wiedemeyer did not test very well at all. His 40 time was 5.01 seconds, a vertical jump of only 25.5 inches. That's not good testing. And obviously, as a result, the stock plummeted. But I think, with a player like him, you kind of have to go back to the film and what he did on the field. And what he did on the field, Texas A&M, was he was productive, had 500 plus yards receiving. He had a very good game against Alabama in that big upset win in prime time. This season was obviously not easy for him because A&M played most of the season with a backup quarterback after starter Haynes King went down with an injury very early. But when you get to the 6th round, I think you look for players that are either incredible athletes or productive guys. And I think this is a guy that you could certainly take a flyer on and see, was it just a bad day of testing? Is he better than he tested, or, is that a sign of things to come? Because again, if it doesn't work out, it's just a 6th round pick, and the success rate for 6th round picks, it's obviously is not very high. I know they've gotten plenty out of Donovan Peoples-Jones and Demetric Felton early on, but that's more of the exception than the norm.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will look at some Pro Football Focus rankings of draft-eligible prospects and take a look at some of the ones that have been mentioned with the Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. One of the position groups everybody thinks the Browns need to add to, the wide receiving group. Andrew Berry talked about what that room looks like for the Browns right now.
I can tell you, Daryl, probably across the roster, I don't think there's really any position that I just feel like, we can stand pat or say, hey, we're done. And I know that may seem like a little bit more of a general answer, but quite honestly, I think that's probably how the majority of general managers, think across the NFL. You're always looking to see if you can add talent or upgrade and add players that can impact your team and to that position specifically, impact your passing game. So we like the players that we have in the room, but we do believe in adding talent and competition where we can.
And Tim, that's clearly one of the areas where they're just not as deep as you would like to be.
Yeah, and I think what we saw, in particular with the Cincinnati Bengals, I keep going back to them, the last 2 years, they've done an amazing job surrounding Joe Burrow with receiving help. They drafted T. Higgins the day after they took Joe Burrow number 1. The next year they drafted Jamar Chase, and all of a sudden they're in the Super Bowl. So the Browns clearly need to continue to add depth to that receiver position. Obviously, trading for Amari Cooper was a big first step forward. I know Donovan Peoples-Jones maybe didn't take the quantum leap that a lot of people expected him to take after training camp. But I thought it was a pretty solid second season for him. You still hope he can get better. Anthony Schwartz, I know people had high expectations for him. I think I said after draft process that pick was more of a 2022 pick, and all you were really going to see out of him was gadget situations, deep balls, end arounds, reverses, you name it, just kind of gadget plays to kind of let him use his speed until he can kind of figure out more of the nuances of the game. But, outside of those three guys, obviously there needs to be more dynamic pieces put into this offense. If they go sign someone like Will Fuller and then draft a guy like a George Pickens or a Sky Moore or Jahan Dotson in day 2, all of a sudden you have a very different receiving core that looks much improved, and you give your new quarterback and Deshaun Watson some pretty good receivers to work with.
So we're going to take a look at how Pro Football Focus ranks some of the draft prospects. Let's start with the wide receiver since we're on that topic. In the area where the Browns would be picking at 44, they rank Sky Moore the 5th best wide receiver. Big board ranking is 22. Ahead of George Pickens, big board ranking 28. This one really surprised me. Treylon Burks, the 7th ranked wide receiver by Pro Football Focus, and his big board ranking at 46 would put him there at 44 for the Browns. Then you got Tolbert at 54, Dotson at 56, and Mechie at 74, rounding out the top 10. So when you look at that, that might be the reason that they brought Treylon Burks in is, that's a guy that clearly the Browns seem to like. And if he's anywhere near 44, I would guess that's a guy you might trade up and get if you're Andrew Berry.
Yeah, doesn't it seem like just yesterday we were talking about Treylon Burks as an option back when they had the 13th pick? It feels like a long time ago. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the pre-draft cycle. And I think we're in the time when, workout results and those things like that, kind of bring change draft boards more than tape right now. And they kind of have more of an impact because it's recency bias. Those are the things that just happened. And the last time these guys have played a football game was 3-4 months ago. Treylon Burks to me is still a first round talent. I know he didn't post the agility numbers that you would expect, but he's still a very dynamic player who has the ability to win a lot of one-on-ones against whoever he's going up against, mostly corners because of his size, linebackers and safeties because of his speed. So I'd be very surprised if he went out of the first round, and it kind of tells you that maybe we're looking past tape a little bit. George Pickens being at 6 is no surprise. It seems like he's been on the rise the last couple weeks, looking less and less likely that he kind of ends up to the Browns at 44. I've said before that would kind of be the ideal pick, in my opinion, for the Browns. It kind of fits everything that Andrew Berry's kind of done as far as drafting younger players from big schools and also going for former 5-star prospects. Those have all been part of his draft track record of the last 2 seasons. Pickens fits all 3 categories. And the other surprise, Jahan Dotson at number 9. This was a guy I thought was number 6, to be quite honest. Seeing him behind Jalen Tolbert is surprising to me. I mean, college football Saturday, I'll watch plenty of Penn State games. All you see is Jahan Dotson making plays, even on a Penn State team that didn't necessarily have an elite passing game. They had problems throwing the football. And Jahan Dotson was still able to put up tremendous numbers, and he's a guy who plays better than his size.
Yeah, and again, those are guys, I think most of those guys would be in play at 44. All right, let's take a look at some of the interior defensive linemen, Pro Football Focus rankings again. They go Jordan Davis for Georgia, big board ranking 20. Then you get Travis Jones and ranking up there at 27. The 4th-ranked big guy is Logan Hall. They rank him 72nd overall. Perrion Winfrey at 84. When you look at those rankings, those really aren't a huge surprise. Maybe the fact that Travis Jones is ranked so highly by Pro Football Focus, that would put him end of the first round 27.
He's certainly earned that possibility. I mean, he really had a great week at the Senior Bowl. I think that's really kind of what brought him to a lot of people's attention. Then that stock has kind of slowly been building. He is a fascinating player. I think I'm gonna keep an eye on him, for the next few years to see how he kind of continues to develop his pass rushing tools. Because I think you're gonna draft him now for run stuffing ability in a day where you kind of have to have lighter boxes because of the way that teams can spread you out and throw the football, especially in the AFC right now, where it's an influx of quarterback talent, it's an influx of receiver talent. It's more spread out. You obviously have Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, just to name a few of these quarterbacks across the AFC. You're not going to be able to play 8-man boxes against everybody. So having a guy in the interior who can clog up the run is going to be pretty important, but you also have to be able to hope those guys can, win some pass rush battles, because all teams basically throw more than they run. So you're going to have to hope that a guy like Travis Jones can develop those abilities. Guys like Logan Hall and Perrion Winfrey, I think those are more true disruptors who can right now play a little more of a role in the passing game than Jones can.
All right, so Andrew Berry was asked about the steep price that he paid for Deshaun Watson, 3 first-round picks and other draft capital as well to get the elite quarterback. Here's Andrew Berry on the steep price for Deshaun Watson.
I think we've talked a lot about how important we think the quarterback position is, and making sure that you have great performance at that spot for sustainable success and sustainable winning. Players at that spot, players at other premium spots, you'll see us get creative for potentially acquiring. So.
And Tim, we've talked about it. If you feel you have an elite quarterback, that's great. If you don't, you're always trying to get one.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen that, if you have that quarterback, all of a sudden your Super Bowl window is wide open for as long as he plays. And, it may sound like a lot, on the surface, 3 firsts and then 3 mid-round picks. But, if the Browns are a really good team in the next couple of years, those picks are in the 20s and possibly in the 30s, which suddenly don't look as good to the Houston Texans. And I mean, if the Browns don't make that trade for that kind of value, that price, someone else is going to. It's just the going rate of elite quarterbacks. They're worth so much to teams because, I mean, the value is there. They touch the ball every single play. They're in control of so many things when it comes to the passing game. It's a passing league now more than it's ever been. And with the influx of the quarterback position into the AFC, with how good that conference is, you need a guy who's going to stack up to those other quarterbacks that you're lining up against, that you're going to have to beat to get to the Super Bowl and have a shot, to try and bring home a Lombardi trophy. So I know 3 first-round picks is a steep price, but if that quarterback is there, if he wins you Super Bowl, that's a steal.
Yep, that's the going rate for an elite quarterback. Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns with an eye on the draft. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about another trade for DK Metcalf.
Hey there, this is Blue. Here's my proposal for how to get rid of Baker Mayfield and actually turn him into an asset. So Baker Mayfield, we trade Baker Mayfield, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and $18.8 million to cost the Baker's contract to the Seattle Seahawks for DK Metcalf. The only problem then being, how do we pay him? But I'm sure Andrew Berry can figure that out. He figures out everything else. He's a genius. So tell me what you think of that proposal. Maybe we can get Baker off our hands and have the most dynamic wide receiver tandem in the league. Thanks. Love the show.
All right, as always, appreciate all of the voicemails. And again, Tim, I admire the creativity. I don't think Seattle's given up DK Metcalf unless they get 1, maybe 2 first-round picks. I think he's that good and that valued.
I agree. I mean, obviously, we know the Browns aren't going to have a first-round pick till 2025, so I feel like that alone almost takes him out of the running for DK Metcalf. And then when it comes to a potential Baker Mayfield trade, they might not get as much as I think everybody thought they were going to get at the beginning of the process. I mean, just the quarterback jobs were all basically taken. And if a team is willing to take on all of Baker's salary, about $18.9 million, that's just tremendous, even regardless of, what you get, as long as you hope it's at least something like a 4th or maybe a 5th or a 4th that turns into a 3rd. There's a lot of complicated things to go along with it, but I think, just that would be tricky to put into a blockbuster trade, and trading away a 2nd and a 3rd when you've already traded a 1st to get player DK Metcalf is really good, but again, you're going to have to pay him pretty soon. You don't have enough money to pay everybody. So, I mean, the best course might just be stand pat, take a young receiver, and hope you hit on a guy that could be a very dynamic playmaker on the perimeter for years to come.
So Kimberly Martin from ESPN on Get Up had this to say about the Baker Mayfield situation with the Browns.
I will say off the bat, I was never an NFL quarterback, so I don't look at it from that perspective. And when I look at it from the outside, to me, Baker Mayfield is the one who has the least amount of leverage here, because we talked earlier about Deebo Samuel. He might want to be traded. The San Francisco 49ers determine whether he's going to be traded. Same thing with the Browns. I know some teams are looking at some of these draft prospects and trying to decide, do we want to go with the cheaper option? What we're going to wait to see how the draft shakes out. The Browns don't feel forced to do anything with Baker. Like, he's on their roster. And I know some teams might feel like, we'll just wait out the Browns. They got to release him at some point. We're going to pick him up at that point. But the Browns, it's not ideal, but they technically could hold on to him. It's not a situation that you would want, but that still is an option. Now, as far as leverage goes, the Browns went after the quarterback they wanted. Kevin Stefanski saying this is a unique situation. It's really not. You upgraded at the quarterback position. That's what you wanted to do. Now you just got to get rid of the guy you didn't want. That happens in the NFL all the time.
And Tim, the other thing I'd say is leverage is something that changes. So there's no rush to trade Baker Mayfield.
No, not at all. And I mean, I'm sure it kind of, to me, in a way, comes down to a game of chicken. Who's going to blink first? I mean, our team's really going to test the Browns to see if they're going to hang on to Baker and his $18.9 million throughout the season, just pay him to stay home. I think that's unlikely, but I feel like that's more likely, in my opinion, than them just cutting him and getting nothing for him. Because if you at least keep him, you have a chance to gain a compensatory draft pick in 2024 for, whoever signs him that following off season. As for, trade leverage, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. I think we're not going to know many more answers till day one, just kind of based on how this goes. And I think if you're the Browns, if you're hoping for leverage, I think you got to look at picks 6, 7, and 8. The Carolina Panthers have the 6th pick. They're obviously interested in Baker based on, a lot of reporting out there. Maybe they trade down to try and get a couple extra picks because they don't have a 2nd or a 3rd this year. Try and get some extra mid-round picks to create some ammunition to give the Browns one of those picks for Baker. And then, option B is we know the Seahawks are in the market as well. They have the 9th pick. I wonder how much, if anybody's kind of not thinking about this, but what if there's a possibility that if there's a way to create leverage, maybe someone's hoping that, someone jumps and trades for the 7th pick from the Giants or the 8th pick for the Falcons to jump ahead of Seattle to take a quarterback, leaving Seattle without the quarterback or 2 that they could possibly want. And then all of a sudden, Baker Mayfield looks a lot more compelling to the Seahawks. So I think obviously it's going to play out as early as next Thursday night, how this all shakes out. But, it's just kind of comes down to who blinks first. And ultimately, we're going to know a lot more about how the quarterback market's going to shape out after Thursday night's first round.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. As always, good stuff. Appreciate the time. Thanks, Tim.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too. Tim Bielik. Make sure you read him. Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns with Randy Gurzi from Dog Pound Daily. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns football. Let's welcome in Randy Gerzi from Dog Pound Daily NFL Spin Zone. So, Randy, we've heard Jarvis Landry's decision is down to the Browns and the Saints. Now, he went to LSU, so he has some ties to Louisiana in that area of the country. Gut feeling, what do you think he chooses? What do you think he's weighing as he goes through this decision-making process?
I think he's probably weighing what situation's best for him. The part of the report was saying that it may come after the draft. The decision may come after the draft, and that might just be not only him but the teams as well. Maybe they see who falls to them in the draft, what players they end up with. So for him, maybe if one of the teams doesn't get any wide receivers, he might be more inclined to go to one or the other. And another thing that he's probably going to be weighing is the quarterback situation. Obviously, in New Orleans, you've got Jameis Winston, and in Cleveland, you've got Deshaun Watson. So right there, I think the advantage is Cleveland.
Yeah, and the other thing, the report said it was more likely that he would be amenable to coming back to Cleveland with Deshaun Watson as the quarterback. That's just the kind of quarterback Deshaun Watson is. I know you've also written an article, Areas of Concern. Now, two areas that you mentioned, defensive tackle, depth at wide receiver. How do you think the Browns address those moving forward, and some names you would like to see at the top of the list to address those two areas of needs?
Well, first, I really liked what Andrew Berry did recently, which kind of helped the team out. And the really under the radar moves was bringing back Sheldon Day, who is, he's not a huge name by any means, but he's somebody that can fill in and start a few games for you. And then Javon Wins as well at wide receiver. So I think he's protected himself in case certain players, if they want, don't fall to them. But I would be kind of surprised if defensive tackle or wide receiver wasn't what we heard called at pick number 44.
Who do you like? We've heard the names by now. Which wide receiver do you like if it's there at 44? Which tackle would you prefer, assuming the usual suspects are there?
My number one tackle is Travis Jones from UConn. I feel like he's feeling really well at that one technique. He'd be a great starter, I believe. Give him a good push in the run game. At wide receiver, I'm kind of torn. I like several names, but I really like John Mechie's probably my favorite. I also like George Pickens a lot from Georgia. I think either one of them could be very good starters across from Amari Cooper.
All right. You mentioned the job that Andrew Berry has done. He talked about having, guys like Denzel Ward and some of those young guys locked up and what it means for the future.
It certainly is helpful when you have guys that are under contract for several years, where you're hopeful. Like, right, there are no guarantees at the end of the day, but you're hopeful that it's a position that is not top of mind for several years, and we're certainly excited about reaching an agreement with Denzel. So it does help with the long-term planning, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it would exclude us from taking a player at the position.
And Randy, when you look at it, they've locked up some of the key spots that you want to have locked up long-term when you're building, a quote-unquote Super Bowl team. Andrew Berry's done that.
He has. He's been very methodical about it. He came in and he filled major needs that needed to be addressed, like left tackle. He brought in a lot of help at safety, and he locked up both of the guards. And then now you can talk about this year, he's brought in Deshaun Watson. He's locked up Denzel Ward. Myles Garrett's locked up. All their key players. I think really the only starter right now that's, a couple starters actually would be Jack Conklin and David Njoku, who really aren't secured long term. So he's done a good job building that. And I know some people will bring up the salary cap and everything, but when you have your core players locked up, you can work around that.
All right, so let's take a look at a couple of NFL superlatives. This is in the draft, and it's from CBS Sports. So this is Logan Hall. NFL comparison is Colton Miller, who's actually an offensive lineman, but this is a guy they feel most likely to be considered a reach on draft day, then regarded as just a great pick 2 years later. And they say that about Logan Hall. Your thoughts about that one? Well, let's do this too. Daniel Hunter, edge rusher from USC. So Drake Jackson, the comp is Daniel Hunter. That's a day 2 edge rusher who will become a consistent double-digit sack guy. So your thoughts? Let's do Hall first, and then Drake Jackson.
I think that is the perfect description of Logan Hall. I think he's going to be one of those guys that when you hear his name, some people might groan a little bit. He's not flashy. He's not going to jump off the tape at you, but he doesn't do anything wrong. He does his job the right way, and he can play defensive end. He can play defensive tackle, and I think that's absolutely right. I think he will be somebody he's going to be in the league for a very long time, be a starter for a very long time.
Jackson, a guy that could be a double-digit guy consistently that was drafted on day 2.
Yeah, I like Drake Jackson a lot. I like his explosiveness. He's got all the traits. He's not a polished player, which is why he's being talked about as a day 2 guy. But I think that Danielle Hunter is actually a perfect comparison. Where if you can get him to hone his technique to go along with those physical gifts, the length and all that, he could end up being a double sack guy for years to come.
Randy Gurzi and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We will continue talking Browns. We head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, and we'll hear about Jacoby Brissett, Andrew Berry's take. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Randy Gurzi from Dog Pound Daily. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about Baker Mayfield.
Hey, first-time caller and huge Browns fan, and I have a question for you guys. Do you think Baker Mayfield's poor footwork after snaps had anything to do with his downfall, and maybe could have made him a better QB, as well as him getting bad pocket scrambling? Just a thought. Thanks, guys.
And as always, we appreciate all the voicemails. Randy, I think there were a lot of things. Footwork is, because that affects your accuracy. And then I think he just kind of lost his confidence. I think he admitted as much in that podcast that he did as well.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go with my answer. Confidence was probably the number one thing. And I think once he lost that confidence, that's when you started to see the footwork slip, because he wasn't trusting what he was seeing on the field. He wasn't trusting his protection. He wasn't trusting pretty much anything out there. So I think it was more of after losing that, his footwork kind of suffered and then his accuracy suffered. So I think it was exactly what you said. It was just a combination of things.
And again, I think he is a guy that, can be a starter in the NFL. I truly believe that. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I think he's a guy you can win with, though. I really do.
I would agree with you 100%. And we saw that in 2020, that when things are going right around him, that you can win. And I really do believe that the Browns were going to try to make it work with him if they couldn't get Deshaun Watson, but they just felt like he was such an upgrade they couldn't pass on it. But I do think somebody's going to end up getting him. And if you can get his head right, get that confidence back, then you could end up getting a decent NFL quarterback.
All right, let's listen into Andrew Berry on what he likes about his new backup quarterback, Jacoby Brissett.
I think, at least since we've been here for 3 off seasons, we've mentioned we think quarterback's the most important position, and that really kind of extends to the entire room. Backup quarterback for us, will always be a priority, just because the way that performance at that position goes oftentimes defines your season, and just like you want to be insulated, whether it's through for injury or lack of availability at other positions. It really is the same thing at quarterback. Jacoby is an individual who who's very talented. He's seasoned. He's played in a number of different offenses, and he's been called into action in several situations, in several unique situations, and has performed well. So he was a guy that we were excited about going into the spring, and we were fortunate enough to be able to acquire him.
And Randy, I don't know how you feel about this. I think they were trying to align skill sets because I think that was one of the big problems with Case Keenum. His skill set didn't match with what they were trying to do offensively last season.
Yeah, and I think we had talked about that before, how Jacoby Brissett's not the same level of Deshaun Watson, but he can still do a lot of the same things. And then you even look down to their third quarterback, Josh Dobbs, and it's kind of a similar thing. It's a mobile quarterback who can do the rollouts, get out there and threaten teams a bit with his leg, but still, be able to complete the pass. And the thing I really like about Jacoby Brissett is when he was coming out of college, you had Bill Parcells was really high on him, and as was Bill Belichick, who of course ended up drafting him. So when you have guys that know the game that well, that are a fan of the player, then obviously there's something there to like about him.
Randy Gurzi, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Randy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Randy Gurzi, make sure you eat him, Dog Pound Daily, as well as NFL Spin Zone. Each week, in conjunction with the Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program, we recognize a role model high school student from somewhere in Ohio. Today, we head to Trinity High School. LeJean Woods, a guy that gets it done all over the place. He is a star on the football team. He is a star on the track field as a sprint runner, and he is also a 3.45 student in the classroom. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program proud to salute LeJean Woods from Trinity High School, this week's Shining Star. LeJean Woods from Trinity High School earned second-team all-conference honors as a junior wide receiver and defensive back this season. And he just keeps getting better and better on the football field.
I've been playing football since I was like 12, like 11, 12. I played for Lutheran West previously. I came to Trinity. I really didn't understand, I feel like I didn't really know what I was doing. I feel like I wasn't like a good athlete. And the people, like my upperclassmen that I met, I feel like they helped me become a way better athlete and pushed me to limits that I didn't think I could push.
Woods has the speed and athleticism to be a factor on both sides of the ball in open space. And he credits his older teammates from a couple of seasons ago with his success now.
I'm a freshman. I'm not even going to play. And they told me, that was like, if you do everything right and if you stay committed, you're going to see opportunities and you're going to excel, which they were right. So I ended up playing a little here and there my freshman year, and ended up starting my sophomore year. So I felt like everything they told me was right, and just stay committed and determined to what you do.
One thing that jumps off the field about LeJean is his athleticism. In addition to football, he's a star on Trinity's track and field team.
We've pretty much tried him in every event to see what he's good at, and unfortunately, he's too good at too many of them, and we're only limited to 4 events in high school, so it does sometimes get a little hard to figure out what we want him to do on a day-to-day basis because he's just exceptionally talented in a lot of things he does. His first high jump meet last year, he took second place, and he only practiced it once. So natural born athlete would be a good way to describe it.
Woods was a big part of the Trojans 4x200 relay team that qualified for the state meet a season ago.
I remember, my freshman year, we went to states for indoor track, and I felt like I was like the weak link on the relay. I feel like I wasn't the fastest, and I feel like I didn't really help the team. So I said, and then COVID hit. So I said, I will never feel like that again. I would never feel like I'm the weakest link on the relay ever again. So I worked, and sophomore year, I get the opportunity to be on the relay again, and I say, we're going to go back to states. And eventually, we go back to states, and I feel like I did my part to help us.
He takes it pretty harshly on himself, and then usually the next couple of practices after that, he's definitely asking for help from me or an assistant coach to make sure he gets a better result the next time. He definitely does not like losing, but it's real more so not losing to somebody else, but not meeting his own expectations.
Giangrande has also had Woods in class, and it's not a surprise that LeJean brings the same high expectations to his academics. He's a guy that classmates just seem to flock to.
He actually puts the work in. So, I can't remember the last time I had to ask him a second time to do something. Just ask him, he'll do it. And if a kid's struggling and he sees it, he'll walk up to him and show him how to do it, especially if I'm not there to see it. So a good example would be like yesterday we were doing block work at the starting line, but I was helping out with the high jump kids temporarily. And there were some kids just asking how to do it because they've only been at practice a few days, and he's there showing them how to do it and then clapping for them to go when it's their turn to go. So he was definitely helping out.
Woods came to Trinity because it offers him a chance to focus his studies on an area that he knows he wants to major in at college.
When I was younger, I realized that I wanted to do like sports medicine. I feel like that's something that I enjoy. So I came here, I'm like, okay, well, they offer a great med program. So I'm like, I feel like that's going to help me get into sports medicine and like have a step ahead of other people when I get to college.
If you know a student who deserves recognition, we want to hear about them, and you can nominate them completely online. Go to OhioLottery.com. Find the About section. Click on Partners in Education. There you will see links to nomination forms. Nominate that student as an academic all-star, and they could end up being featured as our next shining star. Well done, LeJean Woods. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports4CLE. We will see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guests, Mary Kay Cabot, beat reporter for The Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. Brad Ward from brownswire.com. That is Monday, 4 o'clock on Sports4CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend, everybody.